oh, like Sally Hawkins has always kind of played this like whimsical, just like, lovable, quirky character. And I can see why she would probably have chosen to do a movie like this.
It's like a little angel. It's a beautiful angel. It does beautiful things.
What is up, Drive By Movies here, and you are watching
Fresh Releases.
My name is James.
My name is Blaise.
And today we're checking out A24's latest horror film, Bring Her Back.
Listen.
Some people believe the spirit stays in the body for months after death.
It's working!
We can bring her back.
The Philippou brothers Bring Her Back is the story of a brother and sister that uncover a terrifying ritual at the secluded home of their new foster mother. So, Bring Her Back, like I said, is their sophomore film, and it definitely feels like they took a step up from their first film, Talk to Me, but I would say it was a measured, calculated step up. Definitely they're thinking career trajectory wise and how they can kind of maximize this thing, because Talk to Me was a big summer hit. I feel like it was definitely on the lower budgetary end, but it was a film that people were talking about all last summer. I think that was last summer that came out, right?
Or was it the
previous one?
Surprisingly. It feels still relatively recent, though.
Yeah, that definitely was a movie that had a groundswell of people that were excited for it. I think that almost solidified A24's play and movement in like the horror genre for sure. I mean, I think they did a ton of horror films before that, but a lot of like their newer fans that, don the A24 cap and make A24 their whole personality. This film was a huge, big part of it. So how was Bring Her Back their sophomore follow-up, James?
So this is a movie I was still curious to check out, but I actually wasn't looking forward to it just because of how well received Talk to Me was. I went in that movie way too overhyped, and I honestly could not stand that movie. Not from a filmmaking aspect, but more just from writing and character choices. I was just not a fan of anyone in that movie, so that just movie felt like torture to me, just because no one warranted what was really happening to them, but also I couldn't stand these kids. I just thought no kid in that movie was likable, and but still though, I was just like, I don't like what's happening to these kids though. So, it was just like a movie that just felt like just 90 minutes of torture for me, and just, it wasn't supposed to be like a fun horror film, but it didn't scare me like what was promised in the little blurbs. But I don't measure movies on like how scary it is though. I just measure on just how good it is, and always starts off with the script. In my opinion, just that movie just did not work for me. So I went into this movie reluctantly, just not really expecting much. But here we have characters that I actually loved and rooted for. Pretty much everyone, like even the villainous Sally Hawkins character, without spoiling too much, but just like even her, I still sympathize for everything that she was putting these two poor kids through. But I loved this movie. I think it's one of the best of the year. It's not on the level of, I think, Sinners, Friendship, as well as 28 Years Later, but I thought it was fantastic. I would for sure watch this movie again. And this movie, actually made me wince and cringe, whereas what I thought Talk to Me was trying to do, there's a sequence involving cantaloupe within this movie that just I just jumped up and just went like this watching the movie. Sorry for those I had to just flash my legs to because I'm wearing shorts, but I was just awestruck by how wild they went with that sequence. Not that it's nothing we haven't seen before, but just it still caught me off guard because that's the scene that kind of elevates the movie just kind of out of nowhere. But what are your thoughts coming out of it?
Yeah, I would say that this definitely showed off more that these brothers have more to offer when it comes to direction and obviously writing. Creatively, they made a lot of interesting choices with this movie, which I felt like were more reserved and could tell that they've already kind of learned a lot from their first foray into feature filmmaking, and were making choices that felt like, older directors would make. But I think one of the main things here, like you're saying, that Talk to Me didn't have characters that you liked. I would say that this film also had a bunch of characters that I disagreed with, but I think it goes to show the caliber. Obviously, we have an Oscar-winning actress in this movie, like the caliber and level of acting that Sally Hawkins brought to these filmmakers' game. Like, they did great with their first movie, but they never had anything that was the caliber of like Sally Hawkins. And Sally Hawkins is one of those actresses that I think people do sleep on. It feels like people are going to be like awestruck just at her performance alone in this movie and how much she was able to get you to sympathize with her character, although she is, you know, entirely evil in this movie. Essentially, like, she just still does have this emotional human experience that we can connect with and be like, I can understand how somebody would go through all this, even though it is entirely evil. Like, so I think that just them being able to, you know, take an actress that, you know, is completely mastered her craft, really elevated their game almost in a way. Like, it kind of played for each of them, of course, because I feel like we haven't really seen Sally Hawkins in a ton of stuff beyond like the Paddington movies after Shape of Water.
Right, which is definitely what I wanted to touch on, just because one of the things we brought up was in our review for Paddington in Peru, or the third movie, was just like, we felt the presence of her not being there. And now we know why she didn't come back. Like, and while watching this movie, like, I was having conversations just like, oh, you know, like, Sally Hawkins has always kind of played this like whimsical, just like, you know, lovable, quirky character. And I can see why she would probably have chosen to do a movie like this, where, you know, she comes off like, you know, very sweet, but, you know, has very sinister agenda at the end of the day. So it's a very different character that I haven't seen her play before. So, you know, that was definitely like a breath of fresh air, but it was still like creepy and unnerving to watch her play this, like, you know, this kind of sweet hippie, but just like being very passive aggressive and just, you know, being lying and very manipulative towards these kids too. And one thing I did really appreciate in this movie too was just, too often in movies, people don't believe the kids or don't believe the sinister agenda. And that does happen throughout the movie. But I did like that finally we had a sequence where someone like who was skeptical is just like, oh crap, you guys are telling the truth. And, you know, that sequence doesn't go too far, but, you know, it was just rewarding. I felt like, and refreshing to see that sequence, just because constantly in the movie, I'm just like, turn around, or like, just go outside, just do this and you'll believe them. And like, you know, it takes a little bit to get there, but it finally does get there. I'm just like, oh, finally. But then it's just taken away from me with a little mini jump scare. And, you know, so like this movie just like checked all the boxes for me. Like, I would have loved a little bit more, like, you know, I guess I would have loved a little bit more narrative on just like what we're watching with this VHS tape, what actually is going on. Like, there's enough there to put the pieces together, but just like, how does one come across this? And like, you know, this is like, it was shot in another country, I believe, because all the language is in Russian and stuff. Like, just how does one find out about this tape? How does one figure out what this means and what they're doing? Like, I would have loved a little bit more, you know, like details on that aspect. You could explore that with a sequel. But we know that A24 isn't really a sequel, you know, studio. Like, I know they're trying to go for more mainstream movies, but I doubt this movie warranted like enough box office or enough buzz to really push one as much as like Talk to Me did.
Yeah, I don't think that this is necessary as much of a sequel. It did, but yeah, I'm not sure if the box office was enough to get them to want to do that. I know that they're already doing the Talk to Me sequel, obviously, so I think they're probably tied up in that. But this, like you said, it did have me asking questions and being curious. But for me, usually that's like a good sign. Like, I'm not really wanting the answers, but just me having like piquing my curiosity is enough for me to be like, okay, I actually really enjoyed that. If I'm wanting to get more answers, even if there are none out there. But yeah, I'm not really necessarily the person where I like need the answers. I'm just like, oh, if I actually was interested, then you know, that was something that I enjoyed. But yeah, like, I thought that a lot of the horrific elements that they used in this movie were so kind of almost masterfully and, you know, craftily done that it really did, you know, pique my interest there when it came to those horrific elements. Like, some of even just the lines, like, obviously we get that titular line, you know, later in the film of, bring her back. You know, I thought that was pretty epic, honestly. I kind of hate when characters say the title of the movie, but that for me, I was like, oh, I felt that one. But
yeah,
yes.
That one sent chills down my spine. And even just hearing the words "talk to me" too, also, like, I was just like, oh, that line was definitely used on purpose. Like, you know, it worked for the sequence too. It didn't feel out of place because he's talking, our main character's talking with his mute stepbrother, I guess you could say, or foster brother. I don't know what the proper term would be, but yeah, just like in that sequence, he said "talk to me," and even that, I was just like, he said the thing. And I know that the director said that there is a reference to "talk to me" that kind of makes them within the same universe. I don't know what that aspect was. I doubt that line was it, but I'm sure that there's some kind of, like, maybe the hand was in the movie in some portion or something. I don't know, but yeah, I'm curious to revisit this movie.
I would say thematically enough that they're similar that they could exist in the same universe. Makes sense. I'm not interested by that, but it does make sense. Like, they're thematically basically the same movie in that sense. Like, somebody longing to spend time someone that's not here on this earth anymore. Like, they're kind of the same thing. And like also like this magical MacGuffin, whether it's a character in this movie, but it's an actual MacGuffin in the first movie, it's similar enough. You know, there's just a ritual that has to happen with a specific character or MacGuffin that's going to bring somebody back or give you the experience that somebody's back. So they're kind of the same movie in that sense. I just think that this one explored it better than the first one, where the first one, it's kind of like the characters that are dealing with it aren't really experienced in that sense. They're more just like partying and having fun, where this is like a character is actively trying to bring someone back from the dead or have that experience. So I could understand that they would be kind of the same thing. But I will say I would like the Philippou brothers to do something entirely different for their third movie. I would actually prefer if because I've heard them talk on a lot of interviews about how they're interested in other movies that aren't necessarily horror films. So to see them kind of return to the same well for their follow-up feature, now that they have 2 under their belt, I'd like to see them do something that's not horror, because I think that they're just going to pigeonhole themselves if they go down this route again. Like, I think you gave us 2 good horror films. If you're doing Talk to Me, sure, but whatever is going to be your next original movie, I would kind of appreciate if you didn't go down that same rabbit hole again and try and explore something different, something more dramatic. I know that they've mentioned that their favorite director is Bong Joon-ho, so I'd like to see them go more towards that dramatic route, or even just a dark drama or something like that would be kind of interesting for me.
Yeah, 100%. I would love that, just because I think their use of camera work within this movie definitely was elevated from Talk to Me. Not that anything was bad in Talk to Me. That movie had a lot of clever cinematography tricks and camera movements. But within this movie's a lot more slow and still. But just like, I trust them with, shooting some dramatic sequences or even some action sequences, or even having just funny comedic camera movements for a comedy that like Edgar Wright would do. So I hope they don't like get trapped in the same bubble that Ari Aster kind of got himself into, and now Ari Aster is just kind of sucking at everything that he's making. Not that I've seen Eddington, and not that I'm saying it's sucking, but the fact that that's is divisive, as well as Beau is Afraid was divisive, just goes to show that, like, I hope the same thing doesn't happen with these 2 filmmakers. So what are your thoughts on this movie? Let us know in the comments below. That's a great way to help support the show. You can also rent it through our Amazon affiliate link in our description box below. And if you guys haven't already, go ahead and smash a like button, hit the subscribe button, and click that notification bell to get all of our latest updates. And speaking of updates, catch all our social media links down below. We got Instagram, Twitter, TikTok, also our own personal letterbox accounts. That's it for this week, folks. Tune in next week for a brand new video.